Hello, good evening. My presentation will be in English. I would like to congratulate, first of all the people who are speaking before me. The level of the presentations, that was very good. I feel inspired. Do you feel inspired? Okay, that doesn't sound inspired, but maybe that's because of the time. And one more thing, I'm happy to see how more and more in every World Usability Day we talk more about moving away from simple things like functionalities, like the details of the user interface, towards the focus on sharing the knowledge, sharing the insights, and towards thinking about the jobs to be done for the users. I think this is an important shift of focus in UX business, and I hope we will move on with it as the time goes by. And a couple of words about myself. I'm a UX designer, user experience designer. I work for Roche now. I used to be a freelancer. I started with simple WordPress websites. I used to be a graphic designer. I used to be a front-end developer. I also led a team of like 8 other front-end developers. Then I was a freelancer again, and then I failed a startup, and then I came to Roche. So that's my experience. And also, I need this thing. I changed the subtitle of my presentation because the first one was really boring, actually. Adding a human touch to corporate software. I will try to show you how I did that with my team in one of the projects. But before that, I need a pie chart. I'm from a corporate world, so actually 25% of my presentation is just an introduction. And the introduction is about Roche and the business we do and why is it so complex. So Roche is a pharmaceutical company that manufactures and sells drugs and devices that tell you what kind of diseases you have, diagnostic devices. The company is pretty big, hence the complexity. We spend a huge lot of money on research and development. Year by year, you can see that Roche is competing against Nokia, Volkswagen, the Viagra guys, Pfizer. So it's big. We are present in a lot of countries. We hire a lot of people. And we just, in last year, we treated a huge lot of people for different diseases. And these are major diseases. It's the cancers, different types of cancer, heart diseases, and lung diseases. And it's serious things, right? So everybody's looking at our hands. We are in the spotlight all the time. We are under constant control from different governmental bodies. So Federal Drug Administration in the US and a similar body in the European Union. And this is important because we create drugs. We create chemical substances or biological substances that go into people's bodies. So, for example, we also have a lot of procedures doing these drugs because we have to do everything in the same repeatable way to make sure that the output, the product, is of the best possible quality. So, for example, this guy, he's working with the device that somehow creates antibodies. And he has to follow a very strict procedure. For example, he cannot sneeze, right? He shouldn't. What you're seeing here are all procedures used in manufacturing area. And now, I'm talking about those procedures because every procedure has to be taught to people. People have to learn the procedures. When there is a new procedure introduced, it has to be trained. People have to be trained. When the procedure changes, people have to be updated and they have to be trained again. So if there is 5 people working with the same machine and the procedure of how you operate this machine changes, all these 5 people have to be trained as well. So yeah, there is a lot of procedures. And every training, everything we do has to be documented. And this is the way we document the trainings. And this will be relevant to my case study in a moment. So this is a paper called roster. On this form, you put information about who conducted the training and who participated in the training. So monthly, only in North America, there is like 2,000 trainings. And after each training, such a document is created. This is obviously a waste of paper, but not only that. When a document is created, it has a life cycle. There is a process behind it. It has to be given to someone, and this person has to do something with this piece of paper so that the person who was trained is actually ticked off in the system, and we know that, okay, this person had this training. This person has a qualification. We have a process for this, obviously. So why is it relevant to this conference, and why am I talking about this? The reason is that I participated in the project where the problem in the corporate world, we call it the challenge, where the challenge was to simplify the process and create an experience, a solution that would deliver a seamless experience of receiving a qualification through a training without the sheet of paper. So the project manager came to me and he said something like this. And he was like, we think the process is wrong and it could be improved, but there is a lot of assumptions here, right? They think and it could be. So my response was, let's check if this is true, if this makes sense. So I proposed that we should follow the user-centered design process because the users, ultimately, are the most important part of the business. This is a Wikipedia definition, but it's boring, so I simplified it. The basics of user-centered design, what it is, it's doing the research, talking to your users and being close to them. It's about testing your designs, possibly as often as possible. If you're wrong, you have to try again. It's good if all hands are on board. So if you have to involve all the stakeholders into the design process. And it's encouraged to just think broader than just an app. It's not just an app. It's more than that, and I will show you how this works. So for the research part, we created a team of 4. So there is an SAP developer. He's the guy who's responsible for delivering the data for our possibly an application. There is a girl in the middle, Carly. She was an expert in the process from the business side. There was me, the UX guy, and there was the project manager. So we went into different locations, and we did what is called interviews in the outside world, and we call it watch and learn. I'm sorry, shadowing and watch and learn. So we went to a couple of places. We visited different buildings, and we participated in training sessions, and we interviewed people. We were trying to understand what does the training process look like, and where does the roster, this sheet of paper, where does it fit in? This is what we found out, obviously. But there is more than that, of course. The first thing was the process. So what happens with the roster when the participant signs it? So the trainer takes it, it gives it to an assistant, then the assistant uses an IT solution that creates tickets, and the tickets are sent to a learning expert, and then the learning expert sends another ticket to the shared service center, which is the place where tickets are processed. And then somehow magically, after hours or sometimes days, shared service center sends a message to the participant. Hello, participant. We know you have participated in this training. Congratulations. That's not efficient, right? If you do the math and you make calculations, it turns out that there is actually, in the whole process, there is 6 people on full-time jobs just doing paperwork in this process, if you accumulate all the time. What else did we learn? We learned that in Roche, which is, again, manufacturing drugs, everywhere is a classroom. So there is of course a lecture hall like this, but you can also have a classroom near the machines that manufacture drugs. You can have a classroom in the lab where people wear gloves. You can have a classroom in specially separated rooms where there is no access to computers, or where there is no actually, you cannot wear your own clothes. You have to wear special protective gowns, clothes. There are no devices at hand. So most likely your iPhone is below, for example, 3 layers of clothing, so you cannot pick it up. If there is a computer, it's probably shared sometimes. So the environment is pretty restrictive. Sometimes computers are also old. So that means they're slow. Another thing we learned through observation and talking to people is that employees don't really love corporate software because it's boring, right? It's boring. So we had to take this into account as well. The current solution, by which I mean the paper roster, is rather low-tech. This is how they store it, actually. It's like ancient times, right? You put the papers in the drawers, and then you want to run a search. Not very useful. If something goes wrong in the process, there is 4 people you have to contact to find out what happened to your roster, what happened to your qualification. So errors are hard to fix. And finally, trainers worry because they are responsible for delivering a correct set of information about the training to the system. So we had to take all these circumstances into account. Another thing that is important to remember is the task model. I'm sorry it's not a diagram as you would like to see it, but it is still a diagram. For the trainer, the process, the task model is very simple. You prepare for the training, you fill in the top part of this sheet of paper, you collect the correct signatures, and you submit the roster, and then you don't worry. For the participant, it's even easier. You join the training, you sign the roster, and you receive a qualification, and that's it. So we had to remember about this, and I had to convince the whole team that we have to remember about this all the time designing the solution. We took a couple of principles that founded somehow something you could call a design strategy or maybe a UX strategy. That was the basics. So empowerment, this is what we wanted to deliver to our users. We want to make them feel in control of the process, aware of the process, and we wanted them to know that the process is transparent, so they know all the time what is happening with a particular training. And I mean here the trainers, not necessarily the participants, because it's the trainers who worry the most. Simplicity, it's just a buzzword. Clarity is something I wanted to add because I value clarity over simplicity. Things don't have to be simple because they are not always simple, especially in corporate environment. But clarity is very important. So we had to think about even more about our solution. It had to be a seamless experience. It has to be lightweight. It had to work on any device. It had to be usable, and it had to require no training before using it for the first time. It had to be consistent because we had to think about other solutions that people use. And what they really hate is that they have to switch from one kind of interface to another all the time. This is what happens in a complex ecosystem of the corporate solutions. And we wanted to build some kind of engagement. Now, this is a lot. And we were thinking how we could possibly use technology to solve this problem. Should we use RF identification to identify who was on the training? Not necessarily. You would need a special chip on your body somewhere, or maybe on your phone or in a sticker to identify you. QR codes, or maybe we could use an application that reads QR codes. QR codes will be fashionable in the next year. Phone identification, we could probably we could track phones, but not everybody carries a phone with themselves. So we decided, and that was an educated guess or an educated design decision, that we could use something that everyone has in their pockets. It's a badge. It's a corporate badge. So it's an equivalent of your identity. But everybody has it. And they have a chip inside. This is actually my colleague, but I don't want to show who that is. But he's here. So if you recognize him, I can buy you a chocolate. Unless you're working for Roche. So we used badges because badges are the easiest way to identify a person with technology without adding additional or seemingly additional complexity to the solution. Everyone has a badge, of course. But to make it work, apart from the badge, we needed a web application that could somehow communicate with the badge reader and send the right data into the system. So now the question is, how did design and development go? And I was surprised how lucky I was because it went really smooth. I wanted to share like lessons learned and show you all the bruises and scars I got after this project. But it went surprisingly smooth because I had a great team. And this sounds like a shameless plug, but it happened to me. I'm happy about this. So what we did, first of all, we created, during the first iteration, we thought about all the functionalities we would like this solution to have. And we tried to first map it out in user flows, which are not here. And then having the user flows, which were not very useful for my colleagues, I created a mock-up, which included everything that we wanted to include into the application. First, we shared it with the business team to make sure what their remarks are, what they want to add, what they would like to remove. And then we did some quick guerrilla testing with people who were actually trainers, but they happened to be a part of the business team. That made things move faster. The reason we didn't do a lot of testing at this point was that I was in Poland and these guys were in the US or in other part of the US or in Switzerland. So it was easier to just involve people in the team. After that, we had a second iteration, which is somehow simplified, but at the same time more refined, more mature. But it's still a mock-up, right? It doesn't make anything. This was also tested with users on a greater scale. This was more interactive. Again, after this iteration came another iteration where we built a proof of concept. So we took Bootstrap, we took AngularJS. We were sitting for 3 days in an office in one of our offices, and we were coding this thing to make sure that it communicates with the badge reader. So we actually had to do that because it turned out that the badge reader is not necessarily the most important part of the solution after all. It makes you think, wow, they've got a badge reader. But if you think about how many problems a badge reader creates when it comes to connecting the badge reader to a PC, or when you think about the fact that it doesn't work with an iPad, or when you think about how responsive SAP database could be, and this means slow. We realized after building the proof of concept that we should put more focus on text input, keyboard input, rather than just relying on the badge reader. So that was iteration number 3, which taught us a lot about not only the application, but how the application communicates with other devices, other services, and what's the total experience of using this solution in real life. Iteration 4 came a bit later. This is the graphic design. The reason I'm showing this is because it had to be consistent with other solutions that we use in Roche, and we used exactly the same color set. We used exactly the same UI patterns as we are using, for example, in Chris Portal, which is also in the bottom right corner. Chris Portal is the core HR portal which every employee has to use. Actually, the adoption rate is pretty big because they have to use it. But we went further than that. And I actually wanted to be a part of the next step. Because what about engagement? You don't build engagement with an interface, right? It's not enough. Even if you force people to use it, you don't build engagement that way. So we invited employees, whose faces I cannot show. I'm sorry for this, but I forgot to ask them for a permission, so I had to pixelate it. And some more employees from different locations where this solution is being used. And these are not just regular people. These are people of maybe slightly more than average visibility. These are guys who are trainers, who train other trainers, and who promote new training solutions and new training techniques and new training ideas in their communities where they work. And we actually created a lot of posters, all of them pixelated, for every location where the solution was first rolled out, to build this kind of excitement about what's coming. That was one thing. The other thing was that we wanted to show them, hey guys, of course it's a corporate solution, of course it's consistent with what you already have, but at the same time, we invited you to create this solution with us because most of these people were actually part of the project team. So on a weekly basis, we were meeting and discussing different things about the project, the design, remotely. So Google Hangouts, we could use your Google Hangouts. And these people were part of the project. So it's not like we chuck something like over the fence and tell them, okay, this comes from the headquarters, you have to use it. No, they were involved in the process. And even on the badge reader, you have a sticker. And this sticker is also part of the experience. Of course, putting a sticker is not service design. It's part of it. I think the most important part is these people, because they collaborated with us and they helped us promote the solution and build it actually for our community of users. So before I say thank you, which is on this slide, I wanted somehow summarize a couple of things that were mentioned today, and lessons learned I took from this project, because this was the first time I was able to actually do a lot, incorporate the user-centered design process the way I wanted to incorporate it. There were very little limitations when it comes to how I design things. The limitations I found were limitations of the environment I was working with. But when it comes to how I organized the process, that was a lot of freedom, and that was quite overwhelming for me because in real life before, I never had such an opportunity. But a couple of lessons learned is to observe people and start with the process. This was something already mentioned in previous presentations, but I think it's essential. Observing people, how they work, all the details of their everyday tasks, it's essential. What kind of jobs to be done they want to have carried out through the design you're creating. Another thing that was very important was to share the insights. Once I shared the insights from the research and once I visualized it with the team, we had a special workshop for that where there was like 20 people in the room and we were sharing the insights from the research sessions we had before. these people suddenly stopped having so many objections against what I was presenting as a designer, because they had a trust in factual, in the facts, because what I told to them was just description of a reality. Also, user interface it's very important because it's the first touch point for many, many users, but at the same time, it's just a step in a broader context. Also, what is essential is to work on all the elements of user experience. If you have time to Google this, Google Jesse James Garrett diagram elements of user experience, because it will accompany you throughout the whole of your career, I believe, or I hope. And use it every time you want to talk about designing the total experience, because this diagram, it's the essence of what we do. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Do you have questions? Jak ci wygodniej? Umiem też po polsku mówić.
Dobra, ja mam tylko jedno pytanie. Ile czasu trwały prace nad tym projektem? Bo to mnie tak nurtuje.
To jest bardzo dobre pytanie. To jest tak, że trwało to dosyć długo. Myślę, że ponad pół roku, ale czasami była to praca 2 tygodnie pod rząd właściwie pełnego zaangażowania, a czasami to było raz w tygodniu dokonać jednej poprawki czy 2 poprawek i poświęcić po prostu kilkanaście minut, może kilka godzin. Ale to się nie przekłada na język agencji czy pracy freelancera w żaden sposób, dlatego że jakby młyny korporacji czy koła korporacji kręcą się czasem wolniej, czasem szybciej i nie zawsze mamy na to wpływ jako projektanci. Fajne było to, że proof of concept udało się zbudować w 3 dni. To było super, ale był też czas, kiedy byłem wściekły, bo czekałem z tygodnia na tydzień, aż coś się stanie. Wtedy zajmowałem się innymi projektami oczywiście. Ale tak, różnie bywało z czasem.
Nie było, sorry, że tak jeszcze nie było problemu z tym, żeby po 2 tygodniach czy po miesiącu czekania nastawić pewien mindset taki ogólny nastawiony na ten produkt. Jak to wyglądało?
Wiesz co, bardzo bym chciał i też się nad tym dużo zastanawiałem i jednak życie też uczy pokory w tym sensie, że w projekt było zaangażowanych 20, może 25 osób jako taki core business team, które były zlokalizowane w różnych miastach w Stanach Zjednoczonych, częściowo też w Europie. Project manager był z Europy i wydaje mi się, że... Aha, no i też te osoby nie były zaangażowane na 100% w ten konkretny projekt. Dla nich w większości było to takie, no powiedzmy, side job, tak? Oni musieli być, czy byli częścią projektu, byli w to zaangażowani i pomagali w promocji, tak jak widzieliście, ale jednocześnie mieli swoje codzienne zadania. Nie byliśmy w stanie ich odciągnąć jakby na 100% do naszego projektu. Zresztą to nie zawsze jest możliwe. Znowu, pewno należałoby do tego dążyć, ale jeszcze zastanawiam się cały czas jak i no, będę nad tym pracował. To jest moja następna misja.
Dziękuję.
Dzięki. Chcecie iść na afterparty? Dzięki.
Dziękujemy bardzo.